Grief Opened the Door to Heaven, Chapter 10, Memorial Service in Berlin. I can still believe that a day comes for all of us, however far off it may be, when we shall understand, when these tragedies that now blacken and darken the very air of heaven for us will sink into their places in a scheme so august, so magnificent, so joyful, that we shall laugh for wonder and delight. Arthur Christopher Bacon. We knew that we had to have two memorial services for Gabe, one in Berlin and one in the United States, because Gabe had met so many people during his short time in Berlin. With the help of friends, we managed to transform the rugged old youth group room where Gabe had often played drums for YWAM and youth services into a lovely place where we could celebrate Gabe. We didn't have much money, but the Lord provided all that we needed. Brianna had seen some glass water bottles that came in a pretty blue, which she thought would be nice to use as vases for flowers. Then her friend Robin came and told us that her employer had crates of them and that we could come and get as many as we wanted without charge. When we filled them with white roses, dahlias, and carnations, they looked exquisite. The year before we had left Berlin with our RV, I had taken in two sweet girls from Colombia to live with me. They were only 17 and 19 years of age, yet they came, all on their own, to start a new life in Berlin. They became like family in the time they lived with me and were with us throughout the whole ordeal with Gabe in the hospital. The two sweet sisters, Carolina and Danielle, made hundreds of paper doves with white paper and then spent hours stringing them up so they hung from the ceiling at different lengths. When I walked into the room and saw them, I cried. It was awesome to stand under such a beautiful canopy of white doves. We set a table up in the front of the room where we laid out items that represented our Gabe, such as his favorite jacket, his beloved poker chips, and his passport, every page covered with stamps. Tilo's sister Marie, who had also been close to Gabe, designed a small stick-on tattoo that people could pick up at the entrance. Gabe was known for his many tattoos, and she lovingly designed a small heart with Gabe written on the inside. Tilo formed a band which included drums, bass, and a viola. The music was, in a word, heavenly. I will never forget it. After a time of worship, Brianna stood up to read the heartfelt eulogy she had written in honor of her brother. Even though it is long, I have opted to include it here along with the eulogy that I wrote, in hopes that you will see more clearly the wonderful young man that we all loved. Brianna's eulogy. The truth is, there will never be the right words or enough time to tell you how much I loved my brother. I now see that the last few years we had in Berlin together were a special gift because they gave us time, as adults, to grow into best friends. No words will ever be adequate to describe our very special friendship. I always had to help Gabe with everything in Germany because Germany is a very bureaucratic place and there was no end to the paperwork he always needed to fill out. I found myself very often traveling around town with him, going to various government offices, taking care of business, which would have been boring and laborious with anyone except Gabe. Gabe and I would spend the entire day talking nonstop, a mixture of joking, catching up on life, and serious heart-to-heart. Gabe always treated me to lunch, usually Asian. We loved Asian food, and when we had Chinese, Gabe could order in Mandarin. That was just so impressive. Gabe was a generous and sweet brother. Furthermore, I know that Gabe was my biggest fan. He always thought that I was so hilarious, whether I was or not. and smart and capable and amazing. Having a sibling who always roots for you is a special gift. Gabe was a special gift to me. My special gift came on January 11th, 1985, from our parents, Kim and John Droptiny, in the small town of Washougal. They brought him from the hospital to our idyllic home set on 5 acres of farmland out in the green hills in the middle of nowhere. There, Gabe grew up climbing trees, catching frogs in the stream, and building forts. His love of the outdoors never left him, and even as an adult, Gabe was happiest kissing a pig or climbing a tree. For all the apparent beauty of Gabe's childhood, things were not as easy on the inside as they appeared on the outside, a theme that would follow Gabe throughout his life. Our parents got divorced when he was 13 years old, and the foundations of his young world were shattered. It was at this time that Gabe first turned to drugs and alcohol for comfort and found his identity in being the most hardcore. In middle school, Gabe joined the school band and learned to play the drums. Gabe had never been very good at sports, despite our dad's pushing. Finally, in the drums, he found his true calling as a musician. It turned out that music was in Gabe's blood. He soon learned to play the guitar and started writing songs. This really shouldn't have come as a surprise because even as a very little boy, Gabe would delight us with funny little songs and melodies that he had made up. I think it would also not be an exaggeration to say that Gabe was a poet. Not just melodies, but lyrics flowed out of him effortlessly. He wrote regularly. Without discipline or structure, words would come to him and he would just write. After his death, we found even more songs we had never heard before on his computer. I hope we will get to hear them in heaven. Sadly, Gabe could never bring himself to fully believe that he was talented and special, and so he never could bring himself to share his musical gifts with very many people. By the time Gabe graduated from high school, he had become a full-blown heroin addict. Fortunately, Gabe went into Teen Challenge, a Christian drug rehab program. In Teen Challenge, Gabe met Jesus personally for the first time, even though salvation had come to him at a church camp. Gabe's very real encounter with the living God changed him from a selfish boy who stole from his own family for drug money into the sweet, warm man we all know and love. Gabe made the most important decision of his life in Teen Challenge, and that was to be a follower of Jesus. Even though he made some serious mistakes in his life, he never ever turned from that decision. His heart was humble, and his heart was for Jesus, period. I am proud of him for that, and that alone is the reason that he is in heaven. I am so happy that because of Jesus, Gabe didn't have to be perfect to make it to heaven. There is no greater love than the love of Jesus for sinners and lapsed heroin addicts. That is a beautiful truth. After graduating from Teen Challenge and completing an internship there, it was clear to us that Gabe could not stay in our home city of Portland, Oregon, because his drug scene was too much around him. He moved away to Kona, Hawaii, and then on to Taipei, and then on to Taipei, Taiwan, where he was part of Youth with a Mission for nearly 3 years. It was during that time in Taiwan that Gabe would begin the struggle with alcoholism that he would fight until the end of his earthly life. From Taiwan, Gabe moved to Berlin, where he lived with my mother and myself for 10 sweet months, joining our ministry. It was during those months that we all met my husband, Tilo. I can honestly say that I have Gabe to thank for my husband because Tilo's first love was with my very cool brother. I don't think we would be married if it weren't for that first bromance. Gabe never really liked living in Berlin. It was too much city for him and not enough sunshine. After a long 10-month winter, he decided to move back to Taiwan and be an English teacher and live with his good friend Chris Liu. I think that even Gabe was surprised that he was such a good teacher. My mom and I had the joy of visiting him in Taiwan and watching him teach. We were so impressed with him. When he returned to Berlin, Gabe continued his career as an English teacher and child care provider. Although he did well in his field, Gabe was always embarrassed to be a glorified babysitter at the age of 27. He felt powerless to change or improve his situation. He felt trapped in Europe and didn't see an open door back into the United States. So, like most of Gabe's life, a man who appeared all right on the outside was truly very unhappy on the inside. In November of 2012, Gabe found out that he was going to be a father. The news he received with mixed emotion. On July 13th, 2014, Buddy Gabriel was born. I had the joy to be with Gabe in the hospital to witness his first hours being a daddy, and I spent a lot of time with him over the next month. I can say honestly that he loved his son, Buddy, very much. Nevertheless, the old habits of addiction were still very much a part of his life. And so, feeling stressed out and lacking sleep, within 2 months of Buddy's birth, Gabe returned to his old love, heroin. And with that decision, we lost Gabe for the rest of this life. Gabe was found in an internet cafe, unconscious and not breathing, asphyxiated. We know from reading through his last few emails sent from the internet cafe that his overdose was not intentional. What a relief and what tragedy. I can tell you that when Gabe left us, he was hopeful about his life and that he felt loved and supported. We believe that he was without oxygen for nearly 2 hours before he was found, and all the paramedics were able to revive his heart and lungs. His brains never worked again. He lived for 2 weeks in the hospital on a breathing machine before the doctors could conclusively determine that he was indeed brain dead. He was taken off of life support. My mother and I spent every day with him in the hospital, and it was a beautiful time. Even though Gabe was brain dead, we could feel him with us in spirit. We had wonderful prayer times, held his hands, kissed his cheeks, laughed, cried, sang songs, and could tell him at length just how much we loved him and would miss him. The decision to have Gabe removed from life support was a surprisingly easy one to make. We had no desire to keep him alive as a vegetable and prayed that God would spare him such a horrible fate. We are so happy that he is home now with Jesus, but I will miss him dearly for as long as I breathe. I keep thinking about this song that Gabe liked to sing by Bright Eyes. He sang it to us at every birthday. He even sent me a video of him singing it when he lived in Taiwan. The song starts off as a story about this girl riding on a plane next to this man. It will be my birthday on the day that we fly from Germany to the United States for Gabe's second memorial service, so naturally, I'm already thinking about that song. Anyway, in the song, this girl is flying on a plane, and suddenly the plane has engine trouble, and it is apparent that it will crash. The girl turns to the man next to her and says, "Where are we going?" The man responds, "We're going to a party. It's a birthday party. It's your birthday party. We love you very, 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 very much." Then it goes on in the chorus to say that death will bring us back to God, just like the setting sun returns into the endless ocean. And when we get down to the bottom of everything, then we will see it, and we will see it, we will see it, and we will see it. I can't stop thinking about that song because I know that when Gabe left us, he was going to a party. Years ago, when Gabe was first on heroin, he disappeared for 3 months. It was one of the most painful times of my life. My mom and I were so scared for him, and we hated not knowing where he was. That year, our church had given us a free Thanksgiving dinner, but we had already bought our own, so we froze it for later. My mom says I should add that we legitimately didn't have a lot of money. One night, during that really hard time, I said to my mom, I'm going to cook that turkey tonight, and we are going to have a big, beautiful feast. She had to work late, so I cooked it for her to have when she got home. When I was in the middle of cooking, there was a knock on our front door, and to my shock, I opened it to find Gabe standing there looking embarrassed. He was home. I had never been so happy. I knew that God had planned for me to make that turkey dinner for Gabe, because no matter what Gabe did, God loved him. God thought that Gabe was someone worth celebrating. God's love was amazing to me, and I learned something important from it. Jesus' love is unconditional. That is how I know that when Gabe went home on September 17th, that he was going to a party, because I know that Jesus loves him very, 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 very much. No matter what Gabe had done, Jesus was so happy to finally have Gabe home. In some sense, it is okay for me that Gabe is gone, because I know now, for the first time ever, that just like the song says, he can see it. He can see all of those things that he couldn't see in his life. He can see that he is talented, handsome, intelligent, incredibly funny, gifted, a good listener, and that he touched hundreds of lives. Excuse me. He can see how much we truly loved and enjoyed him. The last time we spoke face to face, I told him that he was my best friend and that I couldn't stand to be without him. Excuse me. I said it not knowing, of course, what would happen in a few weeks' time. Now Gabe knows exactly how true that was. He was my best friend. But much more importantly, now he can see how much Jesus loves him. And I wouldn't wish him away from that reality, no matter how much I miss my brother, and will always miss him. End of Brianna's eulogy. Now, my eulogy for Gabe. I want to share one of the greatest gifts Gabe ever gave to me. Most of you know that I am a missionary to Europe. I moved to Berlin in 2008 to share the love of Jesus with atheists. It is not always easy, and Satan hates that we are taking over his territory. Over a year ago, I was going through some personal problems, and suddenly I found myself in a deep depression, so dark that I felt I had no more reason to live. On that particular day, I went to the cafe that we had in Berlin, Der Garten, so I could paint and think. In the midst of my blue spell, my phone rang, and it was Gabe. Mom, I'm working on a new song, he said. Can I come and play it for you? Sure, come on over, I said. He came to Der Garten and practiced quietly the song while I painted. Just having him there brightened my depression a bit. Eventually he said, Okay, do you want to hear it now? Yes, please, I answered. He started singing, and as I listened, tears streamed shamelessly down my face. I was stunned because the words spoke directly into my depression. I knew that the Holy Spirit was using Gabe to touch, heal, and mend my broken heart. Part of the lyrics were, No more love, nothing to give. She has no reason to live. At least that's what she thinks. But she is wrong. She's your girl. She is more precious than gold. You gave your life for her. So let her know that she's loved. Let her know from up above. Restore her crown. She's a princess now. As Gabe sang, I realized that I had forgotten who I am. I am Abba's girl. I'm his princess. He loves me even when I feel like I can't love myself. The second and third time that Gabe sang this song, I left my painting, grabbed an egg shaker, and started dancing. My depression completely lifted. That song remains a gift to me to this very day, as we made a recording of it. Before I share the song with you, I want to tell you about the last words I spoke to Gabe just one day before he slipped into a coma. It was a Sunday. Gabe and I had arranged to meet at the train station nearest the flat where we were staying so I could return his backpack to him. He told me that after meeting with me, he was going straight to Julian, who was arranging a place where Gabe could detox before going on to a treatment center. As I walked down the street to the train station, I was praying to my father, and I heard him whisper, "You are my princess, and Gabe is a prince in my kingdom. When you see Gabe, I want you to remind him who he is. Put your hands on his shoulders, look into his eyes, and tell him that he is my prince. But first bind all the demons so that he can hear you." When I met my son, I gave him a big hug and did just what the father told me to do. I stared into his eyes and said, "Gabe, you are a prince of the Most High God. Don't forget who you are." He gave me a weak, sad smile, and I proclaimed it again. "You are a prince of the Most High." He said he had to go. We hugged, and it was our last goodbye on this earth. Gabe loved to quote movies. Whenever he was away for an extended period, he would arrive home and say, "I'm home, Mama," in a Forrest Gump voice. I believe I heard him say that one last time in the hospital right after he left us. "I'm home, Mama. My prince is home with his King Papa." And that is the end of chapter 10.